In connection with the topic of Gati Samasaha, let us take a look at a paribhasha which is important to keep in mind when we are deriving feminine forms. This paribhasha is not limited to Gati Samasaha. It applies to other kinds of Tatpurusha compounds also. The paribhasha reads, Gatikarakopadanan kridvissaha samasavachanam prak subutpattehe, which means that compounding of a term having the designation gati, which as we know is prescribed in the section from 1460 gatischa down to 1479, or karakam, which is prescribed in the adhikara of karake, which runs from 1423 down to 1455, or upapadam, which is defined by 3192, tatropapadam saptami stham, with a term ending in a krit affix, which of course is defined by 3193, kridating, should be done prior to attaching a supaffix to the term ending in a krit affix. Now, what is the big deal if we add a supaffix before or after? The big deal is that before adding a supaffix, the gender and number of the pratipadikam has to be determined. And if the pratipadikam is determined to be feminine, then we have to add the appropriate feminine affix. And which feminine affix to add may depend on the stage of the derivation that we are in. Prior to compounding, a pratipadikam may qualify for a certain feminine affix, while after compounding, when the meaning changes, a different feminine affix might come into play. That is the reason this paribhasha is important. So what this paribhasha says is that if a compounding is done with a gati term or a karakam or a upapadam with a kridantam, then we should not add the supaffix to the kridantam prior to compounding. We should wait till compounding is done and then only add the supaffix to the entire compound. The note here says that Panini has hinted at this paribhasha by mentioning ating in the sutram upapadam ating. Remember, the meaning of the sutram upapadam ating is a subantam, a term ending in a supaffix, having the designation upapada, invariably compounds with a syntactically related term, not necessarily a subantam, as long as the compound does not end in a ting affix. Remember that normally a subantam compounds with another subantam. We know that from the rules Subhamantrite Parangavatsware, which is 212, from which the anuvritti of sup goes all the way down to 2229, and Sahasupa 214, from which the anuvritti of the entire sutram Sahasupa goes down to 2222. Hence normally when it comes to a Tatpurusha compound, a single subantam compounds with a single subantam. But in formulating 2219, Panini simply says upapadam ating. So he did not insist that a upapadam should compound with another subantam. All that is necessary is that the resulting compound pratipadikam should not end in a ting affix. This is how Panini has already hinted at the fact that when we form upapada samasaha, a supaffix should not be added to the term which is compounding with the upapadam. This is how the paribhashas are born. The grammarians look at the rules of Panini and see what hints he has given for properly running his system. From the rules of Panini, they back out the guiding principles which Panini expects us to follow when running his system of rules. Now, some paribhasha are already contained in the Ashtadhyayi of Panini. For example, Anekashi Sarvasya, Adyantau Takitau, Sthanivadadesho Nalvidhau, so on and so forth. So Panini himself gives some paribhasha rules explicitly in the Ashtadhyayi. Others are deduced, like the one we're looking at right now is deduced from the Ashtadhyayi. It is not explicitly mentioned in the Ashtadhyayi. There is not one single authoritative collection of paribhasha rules, because many grammarians have composed their own sets of paribhasha rules, but not be added to the term which is compounding with the upapadam. This is how the paribhashas are born. The grammarians look at the rules of Panini and see what hints he has given for properly running his system. From the rules of Panini, they back out the guiding principles which Panini expects us to follow when running his system of rules. Now, some paribhasha are already contained in the Ashtadhyayi of Panini. For example, Anekashis Sarvasya, Adyantau Takitau, Sthanivadadesho Nalvidhau, so on and so forth. So Panini himself gives some paribhasha rules explicitly in the Ashtadhyayi. Others are deduced, like the one we're looking at right now is deduced from the Ashtadhyayi. It is not explicitly mentioned in the Ashtadhyayi. There is not one single authoritative collection of paribhasha rules, because many grammarians have composed their own sets of paribhasha rules. But the one that stands out, the one collection that stands out is the Paribhashendu Shekharaha of Nageshaha. It's an outstanding work on which there are many commentaries written by great grammarians. So that has now become a standard in the paribhasha rules. And this paribhasha is in that collection. Okay, let us take a look at an example now to see why this paribhasha is important. Example is V equals Visheshena, A equals Samantat, Chigrati equals Vyagri, a tigress, one who peculiarly smells all around. Visheshena Samanta Jigrati. The verbal root used in the derivation of Vyagri is Gra, which in the Dhatu Patha is Gra Gandhopadane, means to smell. We begin the derivation by adding the Krit affix Ka to the verbal root Gra, using the Sutram 31136, Atashchopasarge. This affix Ka is being used Kartari to denote the agent of the action. This is as per the Sutram 3467, Kartari Krit. Now 31136 Atashchopasarge says Upasarge, so it requires the Upasargaha to be the Upapadam. As per 3192 Tatropapadam Saptami Stham, we know that the Upapadam has to be a Upasargaha because the term Upasarge in the Sutram 31136 ends in the seventh case affix. It is Saptam Yantam. And here we have the Upasargaha Ang as the Upapadam. Now the beginning letter Ka of the Krit affix Ka gets the Itsanya by the Sutram 138 Lashakvatadhite and takes Lopaha by 139 Tasya Lopaha. So now we have Ang Gra A. Now the Sutram 6464 Ato Lopa Iticha applies to elide the ending letter A of the Angam Gra because it is followed by a vowel beginning affix which is a kit and has the designation Ardhadhatukam by Ardhadhatukam Sheshaha 34114. So now we have Ang plus Gra. Now the above paribhasha allows us to form the compound Pratipadikam Agra without having to add a sup affix to the participle Gra. If we were required to add a sup affix to the participle Gra at this stage, we would first have to add the appropriate feminine affix, because before adding a sup affix to a Pratipadikam, its gender and number has to be determined. And since at this stage Gra does not denote a jatihi, a genus, therefore the Sutram 4163 Jaterastri Vishayadayo Padhat would not apply, and we would have to add the feminine affix stop by 414, Ajadyata stop, which in turn would give us the undesirable final form Vyagra. We want to get the form Vyagri by adding the feminine affix nish prescribed by the Sutram 4163 Jaterastri Vishayadayo Padhat, meaning that in the feminine gender the affix nish is added to a Pratipadikam which denotes a jati, a genus, provided the Pratipadikam is not used exclusively in the feminine gender and the Pratipadikam does not have the letter Ya as its penultimate letter. Vyagra, meaning tiger, does denote a genus, but just the Pratipadikam Gra does not denote a genus, and that is what creates the difference here. So if we are forced to add a sup affix to Gra, then we would have to add the feminine affix stop and not niche, because at this stage 4163 cannot apply, because Gra on its own is not a genus, a jati. This is how this paribhasha makes a difference. Okay, so now we proceed to form the Upapada Samasaha between ang, which is the Upapadam, and the Krudantang ghra as follows. The Alaukika Vigraha is ang plus ghra, compounding authorized by the Sutram 2219 Upapadam Ating. We have not added a sup affix to the participle ghra because the paribhasha tells us to wait till the final compound is ready. And the Sutram 2219 Upapadam Ating says that as long as the compound doesn't end in a ting affix, we are fine. We don't have to have a subantam compounding with the Upapadam. Now, usual steps as per 1243. Prathama nirdishtam samasa upasajanam. The term ang, which has the designation Upapadam by 3192, Tatra Upapadam Saptamistham, gets the designation Upasajanam because in the Sutram 2219, Upapadam Ating, which prescribes the compounding, the term Upapadam ends in the nominative case. And hence, as per 2230, Upasajanam Purvam, the term ang is placed in the prior position in the compound. The consonant ng at the end of ang gets the its sanya by 133 halantyam and takes lopaha by 139 tasya lopaha. Now agra gets the designation pradipadikam by the Sutram 1246 krit dita samasascha because we have formed a compound. Now again the above paribhasha gatikarako upapadanam kridvissaha samasavachanam prak subutpattehe allows us to form the compound pradipadikam vyagra without having to add a supaffix to the krudantam, the participle agra. If we were required to add a supaffix to the krudantam form agra at this stage, we would first have to add the appropriate feminine affix because before adding a supaffix to a pradipadikam, its gender and number has to be determined. And since at this stage the participle agra does not denote a jatihi, a genus, therefore the Sutram 4163 jaterastri vishayadayo padhat would not apply and we would have to add the feminine affix stop by 414 ajadya stop, which in turn would give us the undesirable final form vyagra instead of the desired form vyagri. Let us now go through the derivation. Alaukika vigraha is v plus agra. This is a gati samasaha described by 2218 kugati pradayaha. Remember the paribhasha says gati karakopa padanam krudvissaha samasavachanam prak subutpattehe. We already saw the derivation of the Upapada Samasaha agra without adding a sup affix to ghra prior to compounding, and now we are seeing the derivation of the Gati Samasaha vyagra without adding a sup affix to agra. So right now we have v plus agra compounding prescribed by 2218 kugati pradayaha. As per 1243, the term V, which has a designation Gati by 1460 Gatishcha, gets the designation Upasajanam because in the Sutram 2218, which prescribes the compounding, the term Gati Pradayaha ends in the nominative case. And hence, as per the Sutram 2230, Upasajanam Purvam, the term V is placed in the prior position in the compound. Finally, we apply Ikoyanachi to get Vyagra. Vyagra gets the designation Pradipadikam by 1246 Krit Dita Samasascha because we have formed a compound. Since we intend to use this Pradipadikam in the feminine gender, we have to add the appropriate feminine affix before we can add any supaffix. The sutram which applies here is 4163 Jaterastri Vishayadayo Padhat, which prescribes the feminine affix nish. The meaning of the sutram is in the feminine gender the affix nish is added to a Pradipadikam which denotes a jati, a genus, provided the Pradipadikam is not used exclusively in the feminine gender and the Pradipadikam does not have the letter ya as its penultimate letter. Right now we have Vyagra, which denotes a class of tigers. It's a genus. And of course Vyagra is not used only in the feminine and Vyagra does not have the letter ya as its penultimate. So all the conditions for applying 4163 are satisfied. So now we have Vyagra plus nish. The ending consonant sha of the affix nish gets the it sanya by 133 halantyam. The beginning letter ng gets its sanya by 138 lashakvatadjite. Both take lopaha by 139 tasya lopaha. The angam vyagra has the bhasanya by the sutram 1418 yachibham, which allows 64148 yasyeti cha to elide the ending letter a of the angam vyagra. So we now have vyagra plus e equals vyagri. Thanks to the paribhasha, we get the correct form vyagri and not the incorrect form vyagra, which we would have got had we been forced to add a supaffix and hence the feminine affix to the participle before compounding. Okay, let us take a second example here to illustrate the importance of this paribhasha. Example here is Ashvena Krita equals Ashvakriti, a feminine entity bought in exchange for a horse. For example, we could have Ashvakriti Bhumihi, a piece of land bought in exchange for a horse. The note here says that the verbal root used in the derivation of the participle Krita is Kri, the very first verbal root of the Kriyadiganaha. It is listed in the Dhatu Patha as Dikri Dravya Vinimaye. We begin the derivation by adding the affix Kta, the Nishtha affix Kta, to the verbal root Kri, using the sutram 32102 Nishtha. As per the sutram 3470, Tayoreva Kritya Kta Khalarthaha. The affix Kta is being used karmani to denote the object here. The beginning letter Ka of the affix Kta is a it by 138 lashakvatadjite and takes lopaha by 139 tasya lopaha, and we get the form Krita. Note here says that the sutram 7 to 10 ekacha upadeshe nudattat stops the augment it, which would have been done to the affix ta by the sutram 7 to 35 ardhadhatukasyed valadehe, and the sutram 115 kriticha stops the gunaha substitution in place of the ending letter e of the angam kri, which would have been done by the sutram 7384 sarvadhataka ardhadhatakayoho. At this stage, the above paribhasha Katikarakopapadanam Kritbhissaha Samasavachanam Prak Subutpattehe allows us to form the compound Pradipadikam Ashvakrita without having to add a supaffix to the participle Krita. If we were required to add a supaffix to the participle Krita at this stage, we would first have to add the appropriate feminine affix, because before adding a supaffix to a Pradipadikam, its gender and number has to be determined. And since at this stage Krita is not preceded by a term denoting the means by which the purchase is made, the sutram 4150 Kritat Karanapurvat would not apply, and we would have to add the feminine affix stop by 414 Ajadyata stop, which in turn would give us the undesirable final form Ashvakrita. Sutram 4150 says, in the feminine gender, the affix nish is added to a compound pradipadikam which ends in the letter a and has as its prior member a term denoting the means, the karanam, by which the purchase is made, and its latter member the term krita, meaning bought. Right now we only have krita. We don't have a karanam as the purvapadam. So therefore 4150 doesn't apply at this stage. Hence the paribhasha helps us out by not forcing us to add a feminine affix right now, because right now we wouldn't be able to bring in the affix nish. We would have had to apply the feminine affix stop by the sutram 414 Ajadyata stop, giving an undesirable form. Thanks to the paribhasha, we can proceed with the compounding without having to add a supaffix and hence a feminine affix to the participle krita. The alaukika vigraha is ashvata plus krita, compounding authorized by the sutram 2132 kartrikarane krita bahulam. This is an example where we have a karakam, in this case the karana karakam, ashvata. The horse is the instrument by which the purchase is made. And since the paribhasha reads Gati Karakopapadanam Kritbhissaha Samasavachanam Prak Subutpattehe, we don't have to add a supaffix to the Kridantam Krita prior to compounding. We now follow the usual steps as per 1 to 43. Prathamanidrishtam samasa upasarjanam. The term Ashvarta gets the designation upasarjanam because in the Sutram 2132 Kartrikarane Krita Bahulam, which prescribes the compounding, the term Kartrikarane ends in the nominative case. It is Prathama Dvivachanam. And hence, as per 2 to 30, Upasarjanam Purvam, the term Ashvarta is placed in the prior position in the compound. Now, Ashvarta plus Krita gets the designation Pradipradikam by 1 to 46. Kritadita Samasascha, because we have formed a Samasaha. This allows us to apply 2471 Supodhatu Pradipradikayoho, perform the look elision on the supaffix ta, which is inside the compound Pradipradikam. And this is how we get the form Ashvakrita. Since we intend to use this Pradipadikam in the feminine gender, we have to add the appropriate feminine affix before we can add any supaffix. The sutram which applies here is 4150 Kritat Karana Purvat. The feminine gender, the affix nish, is added to a compound Pradipadikam which ends in the letter A and has as its prior member a term denoting the means, the karanam, by which the purchase is made, and its latter member the term krita, meaning bought. So all the conditions are satisfied here, and we add the affix nish to the compound pradipadikam ashvakrita. The ending consonant sha of the affix nish gets its sanya by 133 halantyam. The beginning letter ng gets its sanya by 138 lashakvatadjite. Both take lopaha by 139 tasya lopaha. The angam ashvakrita gets the bha sanya by 1418 yachibham, which in turn allows 64148 yasyeti cha to elide the ending letter a of the angam ashvakrita. So now we have ashvakrita plus e equals ashvakriti. Thanks to the paribharsha, we get the correct form ashvakriti and not the undesired form ashvakrita, which we would have got had we been forced to add a supaffix and hence a feminine affix to the participle krita before compounding.